Hello and welcome back to the Argyle HR Leadership Forum. My name is Vicki Lynn Brunskill with Argyle. It's great to have everyone joining us today. Just a couple of notes before I turn things over to our esteemed speaker for this session. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths at any time during the event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience today. And at any time during the event, you can visit their virtual booth from the main agenda page. To ask questions throughout this session and all sessions, simply type into the Q&A chat and we'll address your questions at the end of the session. And now, without further delay, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Tiffany Kenny, Senior Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Coordinator at PBS. We are so happy to have Tiffany with us for her keynote presentation titled Creating a More Equitable Workplace Across Generations. Welcome, Tiffany. Over to you.
Thanks, Vicki Lynn. Hi, everybody. As she said, my name is Tiffany Kenny, and I'm here to talk about equity and DEI in the workplace with generations at the outset. I have about 25 minutes, and I have a lot to say. So if you have questions, or we don't get enough time to talk about those questions, I'll have my contact information at the end, so please feel free to message me. So let's get started. In 2023, leaders of various companies were asked what they need to focus on for their company to succeed going forward in the next few years. And I want you to take 10 seconds and think about what would your answer be? What does your company need to focus on in the next few years in order to be successful? Now, results are the top 3 answers were attracting and retaining top talent, developing the next generation of leaders, and maintaining an engaged workforce. Why did I ask you that question? Because that's what I'm going to talk about today. According to the DDI Global Leadership Forecast of 2023, these are the 3 things that companies need to focus on, or these are the 3 things that are a priority for various companies in order to stay on par. So today we're going to talk about DEI initiatives and analysis to improve recruitment, how to create a culture in your office that improves retention, and ways to support multi-generational communication. When we talk about workforce and personnel, these are the numbers we're looking at. According to Purdue Global in 2020, 6% of the workforce is Gen Z, and 38% is millennials, and 34%, almost 35%, is Gen X. Only 18.6% are boomers. So that means that the workforce, although colloquially seen to be mostly baby boomers, is not what it actually is. As that workforce changes and develops and grows, you're going to start to see the workforce and personnel change because the numbers are changing quite quickly. This is also in 2020, so there have been 3 more years of Gen Z graduating and entering the workforce. Each generation has skill sets, strengths, not necessarily completely across the board, because there are exceptions to every rule. We all know that. But the thing that I want you to notice is that each generation has idealized and collective experiences that were societal changes that they couldn't avoid. So there are some things that weave within that connect them all together. Gen X is characterized as independent, resourceful, and motivated by achievement. Latchkey kids, that's kind of how that works. Millennials, which I am of one, are tech savvy and well equipped to handle digital and remote work, but they're also easily adaptable because they had no choice. Things changed a lot between when I was adolescent to when I was a teenager. And so we had to adapt and develop to the world that we were currently in. Gen Z tend to be the most open-minded and more socially conscious than any generation before them. And so they have a lot of things that they are concerned about: financial prosperity, social justice, environmental causes. Those things connect them as a whole, but they also have the ability to communicate at a speed that is unheard of for any generation previous to them. So when we talk about DEI and working within these generations, I want to make sure that we talk about what that means first and make sure that we're all on the same page. So diversity is acknowledging the unique traits that we have and may share. It's not just race, sexual orientation, but also culture, interests, and passions, and the way we approach challenges. Do you have a big picture thinker on your team while everyone else is like looking at minute details? Then that's diversity. Everyone is looking at the step-by-step process, but you know so-and-so on your team is thinking, where are we going and how are we going to get there? That's a diverse thinker. Equity is what everyone needs to be successful. And luckily, we all need different things. So just because your friend happens to be a redhead and needs more sunblock doesn't mean that she can't get that sunblock, because not everybody needs that sunblock. You're giving people what they need in order to be successful. Inclusion is making sure everyone feels welcome to be at work and motivates them to not look elsewhere. Discrimination, anti-discrimination policies, cultural celebrations, team involvement recognition are all things that make people feel included. But it's really just creating a culture where people do not feel uncomfortable to be at work every day. Now, when we look at those definitions, we also need to remember that our teams are telling us what they need. Our team members are telling us what they need, but they're often ignored. So as Daniel Kaluuya, famed Academy Award winner, and many, many other award winners, he explained that discrimination, exclusion, misogyny, and belittlement are some of the only times where you can experience something but be seen as too biased because you have the symptoms. We need to trust our staff because they will tell you when the culture is wrong. And if you do not listen, you will not retain and you will not recruit, because word of mouth travels pretty quickly, especially when it comes to millennials and Gen Z. With the development of websites like Glassdoor, things aren't staying within the team culture anymore. And there is a case for DEI and its connection to achievements, including almost half of workers experience discrimination last year. Job seekers are looking for DEI in their workplace, and 83% of millennials are actively engaged at work when they believe the culture of their organization is inclusive. So how do we get there? Let's look in the details. This article was printed in the Washington Post and posted, millennial language. And I'd like you to look at the list of things that were said that Gen Z wants in their workplace. I'm going to give you 10 seconds to read. Now, while you're reading this list, I'm assuming that you read some things and went, well, I want that. That's because there's a lot of crossover. There's no perfection, only Gen Z wants this, and there's this fancy, complex idea of how we get Gen Z in the office. They're actually pretty straightforward, alarmingly so, in my experience. I am a millennial, but I want financial support. My manager is Gen X, but she really enjoys feedback that is helpful and clear. There are things that cross along all of these generational communication styles. So it's not the sense that only one generation wants them. It's that we're trying to create workplaces where people feel included, get what they need, and can be successful. Now, there are some things that are specific to Gen Z or millennial communication styles, like they're not really into small talk. They're not going to stand at a coffee machine and talk with someone they don't know very well about that weird thing that happened on Thursday night, because that might just not be their style. They tend to communicate with the people that they feel close to. And when they're having conversations, they want to talk about work and what they can get done. In many cases, it's because it's not their only job, or they have other places that they have to be. So they prefer to not have preconceived notions and small talk and not have assumptions made about who they are, what their character is, what their style is. They prefer to talk to who is within their culture. But we all have those days where we wake up and don't really feel like having a conversation about so-and-so's baby. It happens. So it's not specific to just one generation. But if you keep in mind that their communication style and the ways that they've communicated their entire lives, it will help you to advance in that process. That change between millennials and Gen Z and Gen X, it will help to make sure that the workplace is a tolerable existence. No longer can you say, this is how it's always been. They expect on-par tech support, advancement, and ethical behavior. Their needs are different in many cases, and so their expectations will be as well. However, very similar to what I said with the Daniel Kaluuya quote, they will communicate when their expectations are not being made, when they need new things, whether that is a quiet communication where you're seeing a lot of turnover, or it is communication within ERGs, which I'll talk about in a minute, or within their teams, but they will communicate the things that they're missing. As work removes from the center of their lives, speaking for millennials as well, work is no longer their only identity. Their identity comes often from outside of work. So they're going to communicate to you that it's not the status quo anymore, and this is what I need to change. Because I'm here to make money, I'm here to do a job, and I'm here to be productive, but it's not all that I have. They're looking at uncharacteristic high levels of loss of pensions and financial disparities, so they are going to expect changes. Retention and retaining top talent, there's a number of ways that you can do this, but I'm going to talk about 3 specific aspects today, just for time's sake. The first one is mentorship programs. It should not just be top to bottom. Peers can learn from each other. The vice president can mentor the newest entry-level employee, and your entry-level employee can teach your C-suite. I'm sure we've been in a meeting and had some technological problem and someone just came in like a magical human and fixed it and then left. And you wondered, how did they do that? That's something that you can learn. We all have perspectives and experiences. Everyone should be learning and growing every day. How are staff learning within your company? Dismantling silos and creating chances for cross-development would probably be the easiest one. One of your executive assistants in HR may collaborate and learn from someone from your marketing team. And during a leadership course, it may inspire an EA in HR to become a successful marketing lead. That's creating abilities for your staff to learn and develop and grow within, and then take that talent to another section in your company still. And lastly, are staff able to learn and develop outside of your company? LinkedIn Learning subscriptions for your staff can help them develop. Getting a C++ cert could develop a new talent for your company and move them up the ranks. But creating opportunities for them to learn and grow outside and then bring that skill back in is quite helpful. Getting tuition reimbursement can be life-changing for many members of your teams. Having an engaged staff means not cutting them off, making sure they feel supported and not belittled in a process, and recognizing them for their accomplishments. The easiest way to do that is with psychological safety, which is a buzzword right now, which I recently found out, but it's highlighted in a book called Psychological Safety by Dr. Timothy Clark, and it supports these ideals. They are, think of it almost as you can't go to the second step without getting to the first step, because you need to have each one in order to be successful at it. So inclusion is celebrating staff wins, making sure everyone is welcome on your team, thinking about who's leading your meetings, who's talking the most in your meetings. Because if it's only the leader of your team, the rest of your team might not feel comfortable contributing and talking and feeling welcome. When you're dealing with inclusion, you need to make sure that you're also just minimally recognizing your team. And that obviously goes with not taking credit for other people's work and things like that. But that also just means, hey, we're going to present this deck. So-and-so created this deck and they did a great job on it. So let's get started. It's something very simple that might seem small, but you can never say you did a great job enough. Learner safety. As humans, we don't know everything. And as humans, we have a tendency to apologize when we don't know something, as if we have encyclopedias in our heads. I know we have the encyclopedia sets, some of us, but they're not permanently implanted in our brain. So as humans, we should be learning, and there's nothing wrong with saying, I need to learn more about that, and then I'll get back to you. Or I got to do a little research, and then can we have this meeting again after I'm clear about what I needed to talk about? Having learner safety where someone can say, I need to learn more, creates the environment where they can feel included and then grow. Contributor safety. Does everyone on your team feel welcome to add to discussions or brainstorms? That's a tough one, because if you have a diverse team that is statistically more likely to be successful and innovative, can you be statistically more capable of being innovative if no one feels comfortable contributing? If the only person who's talking is the team lead and everyone else in the team has thoughts but doesn't feel comfortable sharing them, then your team can't actually grow, develop, innovate, and dream bigger than possible. And the last one, the end-all be-all, is challenger safety. Does your team feel they can disagree with something that is proposed? Because if it's the incorrect move and no one feels comfortable saying it, then you're going to make mistakes, or you're going to have to get all the way down a line of productivity and have to come back because there's a caveat that you missed. When So-and-so on your team knew about it weeks ago, but didn't feel comfortable talking about it. So if the only person that's talking is the one that the team lead agrees with, and everyone else on the team doesn't want to say anything because the boss only agrees with this person, you're never going to get all of the good thoughts and processes that you could. You can learn from everyone on your team, and you can come back with new information, a new plan. But that only comes from your team actually supporting that plan. And lastly, ERGs, or employee resource groups, or affinity groups, depending on what your company might call them. They celebrate and recognize everyone in your office. They also are on the ground and can notice and recognize the needs of staff before it reaches the higher ups. The executive assistants in almost every company have the information that everyone desperately wants because they get it easily. And it takes a long time before it reaches the people at the top. So ERGs create this culture where people can communicate in ways that you might not have thought, and are a fantastic way to engage staff and dismantle silos, because members of the ERGs come from all over the company. So you could have an ERG that is a multi-generational ERG where you have some members who are baby boomers, some are Gen X, some are millennials, some are Gen Z, and maybe even silent generation, depending on what your demographics are. And it creates chances for them to interact with each other, learn from each other, communicate with each other, and mentor each other, in some cases in formal ways. But with productive ERGs that are effective, including organized, have a clear purpose, and connected with the mission and statement of your company, when they're run well, they can make great changes in the lives of staff and have a huge impact on the culture of your company. It creates environments where people want to go to work or feel welcome in that work, or are educated on different perspectives that are not theirs, so that they work better together with their other peers. It includes building things like communities, external engagement, allyship, leadership connection, and my personal favorite, career advancement, because you start to get to know each other, figure out what people need, want, and the skills that someone might have that can be used in a different place. Lily Zhang, who author of DEI Deconstructed, says that DEI isn't what we do, diversity, equity, and inclusion are what we achieve. And there should be seen as action words. There are things that you focus on to make sure you're attracting staff to your burgeoning workforce and retain them through support, development, and engagement. As long as you're thinking of them as action words, you're not going to have to think about them in the sense of, how do I get this? How do I have to do this? Who do I call? Who do I need for help? You're trying to make sure you are including diverse thinking, being equitable, and then including all of every culture, of every community, of every generation. And my email is at the bottom, and I'm also on LinkedIn if you have other questions. And I see that we have a couple of questions. If you have any more, go ahead and put them in the chat. And then I am just going to read them from top to bottom. We'll go from there. First question: how can we stay proactive in understanding and adapting to the evolving needs of their multi-generational teams, ensuring long-term success in recruitment and retention efforts? The best way, the easiest way, is through ERGs. If you have an ERG, specifically a cross-generational ERG, then you are making sure that there's clear communication within those ERGs. And if you have representation from multiple business partners or multiple departments, then you're going to make sure that you're getting the information that you need. But that would be the easiest way. It's honestly, people have a tendency to describe it in a more complex way than it is. It's just being able to listen and know what's going on. And you can't know what's going on if no one's willing to share it. Question 2. What role does leadership play in fostering a workplace culture that values and understands the diverse perspectives of a multi-generational team? Ooh, gargantuan. I need a word that's describes it bigger than that. If you don't have support at the top, especially when it comes to listening and understanding a multi-generational team, then it can't go anywhere. If you have a team that is only led by blank generation leader and they don't want to hear anything from other generations because they don't know any better, or they didn't live the way I lived, or they didn't experience what I experienced, then you're in trouble. Because leadership needs to be the person who is welcoming so-and-so into that fold. So leadership needs to be at the top of that. Whether that comes from intergenerational training or that comes from making sure that they are a part of the ERG, whatever it needs to be, most of it is just listening and opening that door so that they can understand and learn. But that's where that mentorship comes from. I highly recommend, if you have a leader that is very much anti-Gen Z, and most of that is just propaganda, but if it comes from that, then I highly recommend starting some kind of a mentorship program where they're working with a person who is Gen Z, and that would really greatly help. I have the luxury of knowing a comically large amount about Gen Z and how they work and operate because my background is in education, and I taught English and history AP courses to sophomores, juniors, and seniors for 10 years. So the Gen Z thought process and the Gen Z way of life, it's not abnormal. They just communicate in a different way. So I know more about them just from experiencing the way they communicate. They're not disrespectful. They're not rude. They're communicating. You just have to listen. 3, how can we balance the need for customization in employee support groups for different generations while maintaining a sense of unity and shared values within the overall company culture? I would highly recommend that if you are making grand decisions about employee support groups or employee support programs or affinity groups or ERGs or whatever your programming is in your company, you need to make sure that the table of people who is making that decision looks like the company culture you're trying to cultivate. People have a tendency to talk about Gen Z, millennial, and their inclusion in these conversations. Well, how can we get them to be a part of it? But then when you look at the conversation, there is not a single Gen Z at this table. So you need to make sure that the people who are participating in the conversation are also a part of the culture that you're trying to welcome in. And that can also come from mentorship because there are leaders in every generation and every group, and pushing and finding those leaders and creating that spotlight where they can be successful can really create some amazing opportunities where you can have Gen Z and millennials that want to be a part of that conversation and can make some great changes. And Gen X may seem like they're on the top end of that, but age range wise, they're not, some of them are not as old as you might think. So making sure that you have a representation across generation for the conversation and for the decisions you're trying to make will greatly impact that growth. Question 4. In creating a holistically supportive workplace, what practices have you seen work to address the evolving needs of a multi-generational workforce? Ooh, that's a lot. So holistic is the part I want to highlight for that question. And the best way to do that is to actually think about it's not just work anymore. So it's also not, I'm creating a safe space. Gen Z needs a closet to cry in. That's not a thing. Although there are companies that have closets to cry in, and who doesn't need to cry sometimes. Or I saw a company that had cats that were inside of their office and you could cuddle with cats during meetings. And that's great and fantastic. And it works for them. And I love that. But it's also having mindfulness sessions or making sure that there's an office in your room that is quiet and not used. Could be a prayer closet, or you have space for people to come to a DEI office and get pamphlets on mindfulness practices, or you hold mindfulness practices for your company. But it's not just I'm going to make sure that I say, hey, Gen Zs are welcome here, and that's it. You actually have to put your money where your mouth is. And so that's creating that culture from step-by-step process. And making sure that it's a supportive workplace. And that's also holding people accountable that are not being supportive of a supportive workplace. So if you are taking a survey for all of your staff on what their managers are like and in creating a supportive workplace, and you find that there's one or two managers that are not doing great, then those managers should probably be included in a leadership training, a mindfulness training, a holistic supportive environment training, whatever it is that they're lacking, they need the help. And it's not just being a boss anymore. The expectation is you are a leader. And so not everyone who is a boss is a leader, and not everyone who is a leader is a boss. So understanding those differences and finding the magical people who can do both, that's really going to help create that workplace, especially because, like I said, has to start from the top down. Question 5. In terms of psychological safety, how do you recommend companies tackle imposter syndrome? Ooh. Imposter syndrome is made up. Scandal, I know. A lot of it is internal, and often the thought process is coming from the fact that they don't feel included. So it's actually kind of a catch-22. So the way to stop imposter syndrome is to create the environment where those people are successful, can be leaders, can be managers, and can add to a team so that they can be successful. And you need psychological safety to stop imposter syndrome. And imposter syndrome is occurring because you don't have psychological safety. So my recommendation would be that you're making sure that your team is analyzing their team through psychological safety. And are they acting with psychological safety? And that's it for me. And I'm going to turn it back over to the incomparable Vicki Lynn. Thank you, everyone. If you need me, email me.
Thank you, Tiffany. That was terrific. That was a really good keynote, and also a wonderful Q&A. And thank you for answering those questions like a champ. Um, and I wanted to thank everyone else for joining us today for this session. And this session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. Thank you again, Tiffany, for that fabulous presentation.